Hello, it's Jeta, and today I'm finally going to be sharing with you how I revised for every single GCSE subject. So it's kind of going to be like an ultimate revision guide for your GCSEs. So it is going to be kind of a long video because I am going to be sharing every single subject that I did and how I revised for these, as well as giving you some really useful revision websites that you can use, and I will link all of those down below. I am going to separate this video up into chunks of each subject, so all the timestamps are going to be down below as well, so that you can just find the subjects that you want to have a look at. So yeah, without further ado, let's start with science. So I did Triple Science and I did the Edexcel exam board. It won't really make much of a difference though, because for science the exam boards are fairly similar. It's not really going to affect the type of question you're going to get. Just the topics might differ slightly, but otherwise it's basically the same. But it is important to know what your exam board is, so obviously figure that out. The first thing I would say is, before you can revise science, you do actually need to know the content and understand the content. So obviously using your class books and what you've done in class is vital. But as I said in my Things to Know Before Year 10 and Year 11 video, which I will link somewhere if you want to go and watch it, I did say that I don't agree with notes and I don't think it's a very good way of revising. But with science, obviously you still need to know the content and there's so much of it. So instead of making notes, I would say get the textbooks. If you're going to get the textbooks for any subjects, it would be science, and I would really recommend the CGP ones. Those are really, really good because they also have questions and they're quite interactive. But what I would do with my textbooks is just read through some of the topics which I just didn't understand or just completely forgot about. And yes, reading is a bit passive, but it was just to kind of consolidate the actual knowledge before revising it. So I would just quickly read over it and then do something active with it afterwards. Also, if you are looking to consolidate your knowledge and actually learn the content before you revise it, I would also really recommend BBC Bite Size, because they have really good explanations on the content, especially if you don't understand it. But obviously your kind of main understanding of knowledge is going to come from your teachers. So if you're in the lesson and you don't understand something in chemistry, then make sure that you put your hand up and ask questions. And then at the end of the lesson, if you still don't understand something, ask your teachers. And I'm sure that there are some resources at school that you can use, such as, I don't know, like science mentoring or something. Yeah, find out if there's anything like that at school. But with these three resources of your textbooks, BBC Bite Size, and your teachers and class notes, you should understand and have the knowledge which you need in order to start your revision. Once you actually have that knowledge, then you can start testing yourself on that knowledge. And I think the best way to test the knowledge for science is flashcards. I think that's the first course of action for science. So now, the thing is that we all promise that we're going to make flashcards as we go along after every lesson. But in reality, a lot of the time we don't do that. I didn't stick to this at GCSE with science. I did make a couple of kind of flashcard sets for some of the topics, but not for all of the topics. And that leaves you in kind of a bad position, because when it comes to your exams, you really don't have the time to be making flashcards. So what do you do then? Well, I would recommend Physics and Maths Tutor. Physics and Maths Tutor is a brilliant resource, but not only for science, for maths, geography. I will definitely mention them again in this video. But what is so great about this website is that for each topic in science, for your specific exam board, they have flashcards already made for you on there. And these flashcards come directly from the specification, so it is exactly what you need to know. And actually that is a good point. Even when if you decide to make your own flashcards, make sure that you're using the spec to make them, so that they are as accurate as possible for what you actually need to know. But anyway, going back to the flashcards on Physics and Maths Tutor. So I discovered these around the time that I was doing my Year 11 mocks. I went through the biology flashcards for every single topic, and I went from a 6 to an 8 in less than 2 months, which I think is a big improvement. Oh, I hate cloudy days. The lighting comes in and out and it's really annoying. Okay, carrying on. So yeah, I would recommend physics and maths tutor flashcards, especially if you want to save some time. But if you do decide that you do want to make your own flashcards, then make sure that they are really simple and easy to use. So for example, have the question on the front and the answer on the back in colour, and just really easy to test yourself with those. So another great website to use in order to test that you know the content is Seneca Learn. Seneca Learn is probably best used before you even start going through your flashcards, because as well as testing your knowledge and, you know, asking questions and things like that, it also has some notes that you read through. So you will read through just a couple kind of bullet points, and then it will ask you questions about it. So I used Seneca Learn for topics where I really didn't know the contents. Topics which I genuinely forgot completely, I would use Seneca Learn, and then I would do flashcards afterwards, because flashcards you can only really use when you genuinely know the content in full. And then after doing Seneca Learn and flashcards and all those things, I would highly recommend blurting. Blurting is when you take the topic and put it in the middle of a page and then just mind map every single thing that you can remember about this topic. So things like key terminology, just general content, any practicals, methods, definitions, and just set a timer and write all of these down. And when the timer's up, then you can reference back to your textbook and check if you've missed anything out, and if you have, write it in a different coloured pen. And by doing blurting for the topics again and again and again, the idea is that you will start to remember everything and your gaps in knowledge will decrease as you go along. And the final thing to do, probably the most important thing, is to do past papers. I think everyone tells you to do this, but it's because it is so important to do. Doing past papers and then actually marking them. For science, the mark schemes are really specific, and sometimes it will require you to phrase things in a certain way. But if you're doing past papers and marking them consistently, you will start to pick up on these things, and you will also start to see some patterns. There are only so many things they can ask you in science because the content is the content. So if you keep doing these questions, sometimes in your mocks, you might literally get a question which you've already done in a past paper, or even in the final exam, you might get a really similar question to one that you've already done. So yeah, past papers are vital for science, so make sure that you do those. And yeah, that is everything that I did for science. Now I'm going to move on to maths. Maths is a subject which did not come easily to me. It isn't something that I just get. I had to work really hard in maths in order to get the grade that I did get. So the first thing for maths is that you need to actually understand the content. You need to get how to do the questions, because if you don't understand the questions, then you can't answer them. So for that, I would say use your teachers, because they are there to teach you. Just really make sure that you actually get how to do it. For example, I found simultaneous equations a little bit difficult at first. So I made sure that I was asking questions in class and really trying with the questions that we were doing. And then when I went home, I would do more practice questions. But if you don't get how your teachers explained it, which is perfectly normal, sometimes your brain just won't understand a certain type of explanation, then I would recommend either use your textbook. I would really recommend that you get the CGP textbook, this one. But obviously for your exam board, I did Edexcel for maths. These are great because they have really in-depth explanations. They're all in colour and it's really easy to understand. And at the bottom, they also have kind of exam questions and practice questions to consolidate your knowledge. This book for maths really was my lifeline. I don't think I would have gotten through maths GCSE without this book. It is incredible. And really, it is pretty affordable. I think I got it for £4 or £5. So then another thing I would really recommend is making flashcards for the key formulas and equations. For maths, you can't really make flashcards on the content because it's just knowledge of how to answer questions. But in terms of the formulas that you need to know off by heart, then definitely learn those. I made this fat. stack of flashcards with basically all the formulas that I would need to know for maths. I would just add to these as I went through the years, and I went through these on such a regular basis. Like every time we had a little topic test, I would go through all of them, and I learned them all. I didn't forget a single equation in any of my exams because I just knew them all. And they're just really simple. For example, I had the cosine rule to find a side, and on the back I would just write the cosine rule. I also put things like side rules and indice rules and circle theorems and things like that on here too. So it doesn't always need to be just equations. It can be just things that you tend to forget and rules that you tend to forget a lot in maths. So yeah, make a stack of flashcards for all your key equations. And then the last final thing for maths, the most important thing for maths, if you're going to be doing anything, it is this: practice, practice, practice. Just do loads of past papers, loads of question papers. I would recommend that you get the CGP like practice questions. This one is just the workbook. It has a load of practice questions. This one is probably more useful, and I would recommend you get this. Basically, they are past exam questions for each topic. So for example, direct and inverse proportion, and then you have exam questions for those with the grade that they are at and the marks and everything. And then at the back there are also some full exam papers in this book, so highly recommend this because with exam papers sometimes you don't know all the content yet. Sometimes you only want to do exam questions on surds, and so having this book was really useful because I could just hone in onto one topic. But there are other ways to get practice questions. As I said, for science, physics and maths tutor. Incredible for maths as well, has lots of past papers, and also they are by topic, which is quite good, so you don't need to necessarily get just a whole past paper. Same thing for science actually, I didn't mention this before, but the exam papers are by topic, so if you want to revise only one topic, then you can find the exam papers for those. Another place to get lots of practice questions is Corbett Maths and Maths Genie. I will link all these websites down below, but they just have a load of maths papers and practice questions. So yeah, I think with maths, the key thing to do is just practice. So then, moving on to English literature. One thing to know about me with English literature is that I love it. It is my favourite subject, which is why I'm doing it for A-level. But genuinely, I enjoyed it so much that it didn't feel like work. It was just so fun. And English did come very easily to me. With English, I'm going to separate into plays and novels and then poetry. And then I'm also going to be talking about your actual essays at the end. So with novels and plays, you need to learn the key quotes. Obviously, that's really important. I think the best way to learn key quotes is through flashcards. Maybe on Quizlet or physically, doesn't really matter. I, for Macbeth, went through and put posted tabs on all the pages. I basically did this so that for each colour, it represented a character. So green was Macbeth, so if I wanted to find a quote on Macbeth more easily, I could find it here. All of the quotes, the key quotes were highlighted on the page, and then from this I created flashcards. I learned quotes by character mainly, but also then out of those quotes I would kind of characterise them by theme as well. But that kind of brings me on to the next point, which is learn your themes. Understand the themes of the book, and also learn the characters and understand the characters of the book. You can get lots of information on this on SparkNotes or Lit Charts. Those are the two websites I would highly recommend for English Lit. I also got the text guides for my text, so for Macbeth and for Animal Farm. We were also going to do Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but that got cut off the course, although I did read it in my spare time. But yeah. These basically just go through kind of each chapter or each act and analyse them and give you some context. It goes through all the characters and everything. They are very useful. I did get a lot out of these text guides. However, I would say they're not necessary because you can find a lot of that stuff online as well. Another thing is, which is just vital, is that you need to know the plot inside out for all of your novels and plays and everything. Obviously, the main thing in order to understand the text is just to reread them. You will read them once in class, that is not enough. You need to read it again. I would say if you want to really know a text inside out, you need to read it 3 times. Once in class and then twice on your own. And when you reread them again on your own, make sure that you're making more analysis, more independent, original thoughts, and use websites like SparkNotes and LitCharts to help you along, because sometimes teachers can miss things with texts. They are really big and really dense, and it's impossible for them to mention everything. So you might pick up on some new things if you reread them on your own, which is why it's so important. And then to test that you know the plot, I would recommend, there's some quizzes on SparkNotes, which is quite fun. I did a few of these. They just test your knowledge on the plot and the events, which is really good. I also made some plot summaries for Macbeth, where I just kind of had a page where I would have, for each scene or chapter for Animal Farm, I would have the summary. I would then have characters involved, key themes and key context points and key quotes. And I'd have a page for each scene for Macbeth. That's what I did. Unfortunately, I can't show you these because I threw them away because I don't need them anymore, but I didn't think about this video, so I'm sorry about that. But I also did the same thing for Animal Farm. For each chapter, I wrote a summary of what happened, characters involved, key context, key themes, and key quotes. And that just helps you to consolidate all of the plot because you really need to know what happens in your novels. And then the last thing for your plays and novels is that you need to know context. So you can get context from your own research, SparkNotes, LitCharts, probably from your own lessons and class notes as well. You don't need masses and masses of context for GCSE. That's how it differs from A-level, but you need to know the context. Because in some of your essay questions, the example does require you to use context in your essay, but obviously that depends on the question. Moving on to poetry, I would suggest learning the poems in full. Some people just learn key quotes of the poem, but honestly, I just think you need to know the whole poem because when you are talking about it, you need to refer to the form and the structure, and in order to do that, you just need to know the whole poem. And I know that 15 is a lot, but if you start from the beginning, learning those poems, it isn't impossible. And then another thing I would say is to analyse them without your class notes. So as revision, I would just get up a plain copy of the poem and then just analyse it with my own thoughts, as well as using online resources, because your teachers will probably not mention every single thing that there is to say about the poem. And so I really recommend Genius. I will link it down below. The website is a bit strange. You can't really find the poetry section on the website. It's a bit confusing, but if you just search up the name of the poem, the author, and then write Genius, there is a website which has, I found, such good analysis on the poem, but the analysis is very original because basically what it is it has the poem there, and then for each kind of line or word you can click on it, and then there's a notes from other people who've read the poem and they can write their thoughts, and you just get a lot of original thoughts from other people because these are their kind of own ideas. This isn't teacher and like big websites who have just kind of purged all the main points about the poem. These are really minor points that you could pick up on, and I really loved using this website because I picked up so many niche points about the poems that I hadn't even thought of before. So I would really recommend using that. And that's all on poetry. In terms of revision overall for English, lots of practice essays and plans, super important. I'm going to say this for every subject, but you need to be doing practice essays, you need to be doing practice essay plans. And then for your actual essays, some tips is embed your quotes. Really, really important. Another thing is to kind of zoom in on words when you are analysing. Yes, analyse the quote as a whole, but also then zoom in on a specific word. For example, serpent. Serpent has connotations of cunningness and being evil and sly, which perhaps even alludes to religious imagery and things like that. So zooming in on the words, really kind of honing in on the little details of the quote. My English teacher described it as kind of taking this quote like a sponge and really squeezing out all of the juice, kind of like a lemon or something. So yeah, make sure that you, yes, are analysing quotes as a whole, but also really honing in on the little details in order to get the top marks. Another really important thing that everyone seems to forget, you need to talk about form and structure as well as language features. It's great to talk about similes and metaphors and alliteration and juxtaposition and onomatopoeia and all those things, but it's equally as important to talk about the structure. So for example, what does the exclamation mark do to the sentence, or how does the caesura or enjambment add to the text? Talking about form and structure is vital, because if you don't, then you can't hit the top marks. So don't get too carried away with all the language analysis. Make sure that you also talk about form and structure. So now going on to English language. English language is hard to revise for because you're not really remembering any content. It's all unseen. So one of the things that I did is just understanding the exam papers, understanding how you need to structure each of the essay questions, knowing exactly how the exam paper is going to look, and also memorizing the timings. I knew exactly how much time I needed to spend on each question of the exam paper, because in the beginning I found it really hard to finish on time with the language papers because there are so much that go into them. But by knowing the timings, you can be really strict on yourself, and then you can kind of make sure that you're on track. Another thing to do is just practice analysing unseen texts. So go on your exam board and just find some past papers and then look at the text and just analyse them. Ask your teachers for like little extracts of text and just analyse them. I got really good at like analysing very quickly when I'm reading an extract, and that's so important for the exam because you don't have that much time to focus on them and you haven't studied it before the exam. So now going on to the creative writing side of the language paper. In order to get top marks, you need to basically do a couple of things in your creative writing. One of the things is to use kind of complex vocabulary. I have a little notebook where I just write any words that I don't understand, and these are often complex vocabulary. I just write them down in this notebook, and I would just read through these words before an exam just to kind of have a couple of more advanced vocabulary words kind of flowing in my brain. Another thing is you need to read. You really need to read books, especially fiction. It will expand your vocabulary so immensely. It is so important to read widely, and I think for your English language paper, the creative writing side, the best revision you could do, actually, in my opinion, is read fiction. So reading fiction is fun, it's a hobby, and you could do it as a form of revision, which is crazy and so exciting. So yeah, read fiction, and that will also help for being able to create original stories, because in your creative writing part of the exam, another thing that they mark you on is originality. You need to come up with a description or a kind of story idea which is original, because if the examiner is just reading the same thing over and over again, they're going to be so bored. So you need to come up with original ideas. And what I mean by this is, I did OCR for English. In my exam, we were given two options for the creative writing. You were given a title, or you could just follow a task where it's like, write about this and this and this. I would normally pick the title because I feel like you can really do something original with it. An example is for a practice paper that I did, the title was The Outsider, and I wrote about a daughter visiting her mother's grave. and how she felt like an outsider because she was surrounded by darkness and the dead in this graveyard, and she felt so out of place, like an outsider because she'd never been there before. Or another, in my mocks, the title I think was The Playground, and I talked about a child who was locked in the basement of their house, and that is their playground because it's where they spend all their time. And it was from the perspective of a very young child, and how the child would imagine his stuffed toys playing in this like wonderland, and that was his playground, his imagination in this basement. As you can see, my ideas were very morbid and quite dark, but I did find through doing so many practice papers and practice creative writings, the stories that were dark were often my best pieces of writing. So it is kind of important to realise which kind of writing style suits you best and creates the best work, because ultimately you need to be writing the best that you can in that exam. And if you know that you're really great at comedy writing, then just stick to that, because it means that you're more likely to hit those top grades. Another thing that's important is write in a unusual form, or just a complex form. So what I mean by this, for example, is using a flashback in your piece of writing. That is a very complex technique which will get you the top marks. Or using a motif. What I mean by motif is, for example, in Macbeth, the motif of blood is there throughout, talking about redness and paint and tints and all of this stuff. So yeah, if you manage to implement a motif in your work, that is another really complex technique which you could get very high marks for. And the final thing that you need to be doing is using a very wide range of punctuation and sentence structures. Vary your sentence length, some really short, some really long, and make sure that that actually has an impact on what you're trying to convey. Use semicolons, colons, commas, exclamation marks, speech marks, not too much, but if you can include like one piece of speech, it's great. Dashes, use parenthesis, and yeah, just try to really use a wide range of punctuation, because that will also enable you to hit the top marks. But that is everything I have to say about English language. Now moving on to Spanish. This will apply to any language that you do though. Obviously the main thing to do is learn the vocab. Unfortunately, there is no set vocab list, but there is kind of the main vocab. How to find this? It's kind of the stuff that you do in class, the main vocab that's mentioned. But I found all of the main vocab on BBC Bite Size's phone app, which has these flashcards with all the kind of main vocabulary for each topic, and I use that to make Quizlet flashcards and just learn them. And then for extra vocab, it's just kind of any vocab that comes up in class, write it down, and then just make a little Quizlet flashcard set of extra vocab things. And then also just immersing yourself in the language. So I went on a Spanish exchange in year 10, and it was honestly the best experience of my life. I went to live with another family in Spain for 7 days, and my Spanish exchange, Beatriz, was just so lovely, and I'm still friends with her to this day. Her family were so welcoming, and it really improved my Spanish greatly, especially my accent. So if you are offered an opportunity like that, I would wholeheartedly recommend that you do that. But alternatively, you can just watch loads of Spanish films and try and read some Spanish books if you can, but this applies to any language. And then two other things that you need to revise for Spanish are tenses and grammar. For tenses, I made like a poster, and I also made some flashcards on Quizlet. And then for grammar, all you can really do is just like practice questions, practicing your grammar, and you can ask your teacher for some questions for those. But I also really recommend Seneca Learn for Spanish, whether that be for vocab, tenses, grammar. Seneca Learn is great for languages. Now moving on to history. History is a very content-heavy subject. My textbook for just one topic in history was the same as my textbook for geography for all the topics, which is just crazy. So what I would recommend that you do is make flashcards on Quizlet for the key events, key people, and key dates. And and just go through these. If you're going to make flashcards as you go along for anything, it would be history, because there is so much content. And I would also really recommend that you make a timeline, just so that you can visibly see how everything kind of takes place. Because when you're learning the content, you're not always going to learn it in chronological order. You might kind of jump around a bit. So just to have an idea in your head of how everything comes and plays across is so important, especially because in your exams, the essay question will sometimes ask you to talk about a certain time frame, and you need to know what key events happened in that time frame. Because if you talk about something that was a little bit after or a little bit before, you're not going to get any marks for it, because it's wrong. It's not part of the time frame that they're asking you to talk about. So that's why dates are really important. And then I also really recommend blurting for history as well. As I said before, writing the topic in the middle of the page and then just blurting everything that you can remember about that subtopic on the page, and then referring back to your textbook, adding in anything that you forgot, and just doing it again and again and again till you know everything. But yes, obviously content is so important for history, but equally I think it's important to be able to take your content and put it into the context of your exam questions. So you need to be really comfortable on answering source questions, interpretation questions, and all of the stuff that you're going to have to do. And the only way to get good at that is by practicing the essays, but also make sure that you're getting as much help from your teachers as possible so that they can fully explain to you how to answer those questions. But remember that in your exam, they're not going to ask you a specific question like, when was the Enabling Act created? They're more likely to ask you, what were the causes and events which led up to Hitler's rise to power, or something like that. So getting the content and putting it into the context of the exam questions. Now, geography. Well, I don't have much to say about how I revised for geography, because in all honesty, I just didn't revise for geography. I did very little revision, which is not good, obviously, but I think geography is one of those subjects where there is not too much content and the exam questions are pretty straightforward. And so I think it's just about making sure that you're using your own common sense and logic and applying that to your course as well. So in terms of revising, I would recommend making some flashcards on the key content, especially the physical sides of geography. So for example, I made a flashcard on the formation Oxbow Lakes, because you need to know how those are formed. So I did make some flashcards, however I did not make enough and I didn't really go through them very much either. Don't do that. I would recommend actually going through the content, and secondly doing lots of practice papers and making sure that you are able to apply the content, especially for the 8-mark questions. Being able to evaluate the information that you're given, also knowing how to read and interpret graphs and information and things like that. So those are just like exam skills that you need to learn, but that's literally all I think you need to do for geography and all I did. I mean, I might be wrong. There might be so many other things that you could be doing for geography. I just don't have any. I'm really sorry. I would say though, physics and math tutor does have some geography stuff on there. So past papers, go to physics and math tutor. They have some great geography stuff, and also I'm sure that they have some sort of revision resources other than that. So yeah, go and check it out. But I'm not really sure because I didn't use very many geography revision resources. So yeah. Now on to religious studies. RS was compulsory for us in our school. I did AQA, and in my opinion, RS is a little similar to geography, where I don't think it's not really required to do loads and loads of revision. You just need to kind of know your stuff and then apply it. At least that's what I found. So what I did was I would learn any quotes from the Bible or the Quran. We studied Christianity and Islam. So whatever you're studying, whichever two religions you are focusing on, learn the quotes that you would need based on the topics from the kind of religious books. So the Bible or the Quran is what I had to focus on. So I would put those quotes on some flashcards and learn them. I also learn key arguments, especially for the kind of more theme-based topics. So learn arguments, not only from religious perspectives, but also from atheist perspectives, philosophers and things like that. And also any key terminology, especially for the religions, making sure that you know all the words for the practices that they do, etc. And finally, just past papers, lots of essay practice and things like that. So yeah, that's all I did for RS. And then finally, I'm going to talk about drama. Drama's a bit of a weird one because there's not really much revision you can be doing, but I thought I'd mention it here because I haven't seen very many videos about drama and how you can make sure that you get the best grades in drama. So first of all, coursework. Coursework, don't leave things to the last minute. I was pretty consistent with my coursework, but still I came to a point where I had to stay up till 2 a.m. to get it done the night before it was due. Don't be in that situation because it's stressful. But as you can see, I ended up in that position even though I was very much on top of it all the time. So with coursework, there's always something that comes up that you realise you haven't done. So try to kind of stay on top of it and don't leave it to the very last minute. Make sure that you've explained everything you've said in your coursework. If you're going to use a piece of research like an article, make sure that you're annotating it. It's just important to like over-explain everything that you've done in your performance piece and kind of put it in your coursework. Just, yeah, over-explain everything, even if sometimes it feels so trivial and a bit of a waffle really, but it's what you need to do. Group performance. With this, don't be too worried about what group you get because at the end of the day, you are being marked individually. With your group, explore ideas. You know, if someone comes up with something really weird, try it out because sometimes it ends up working. Just be really flexible with what you're doing. Plan out your time. Make sure that you know what you're going to be doing for each drama lesson so that you stay on top of things and don't end up having to like rush your performance last minute because especially when you're in a group, it's really hard to just add a new scene if not everyone's comfortable and confident with doing it. So yeah, plan your time, but most importantly, don't stress too much. Group performances can be really worrying because you have to rely on other people as well. But I think it's just important to know that everyone's trying to get a good grade. I don't think that your group performance is everything, and I think that your drama teachers are going to give you a grade based on your own individual performances, not the whole group. So bear that in mind. Then moving on to monologues, try doing it in different ways. Sometimes it's easy to really get stuck down with your monologue. Try different tones. Try to say a line in a different way and really explore how you deliver it because your monologue is something that's really individual to you. And I think it's important to try to explore all ways of saying it. Fully flesh out your performance essentially, really kind of develop the way that you're portraying your character, and also finally I would say don't be afraid to go full out. And what I mean by full out is really feel your emotions when you're on that stage. Don't feel embarrassed in any way. In my monologue was really at a really pivotal point in the character's life. It was very emotional, and coincidentally, the day that I had to do my monologue, I had been going through some stuff in my personal life, especially that week. So I was feeling quite down in general, which ultimately really helped me with my monologue because I was very emotional on stage. And it wasn't just because it wasn't all acting essentially, but in the end, it all worked out for the best. And finally, for your written exam, make sure that you know your script, read the play multiple times, know the plot fully, and then just do loads of practice papers. So yeah, those are all the subjects that I did for GCSEs. I hope that I've given you some tips that will hopefully help you. Every website that I've mentioned is going to be linked down below. And yeah, good luck with your GCSEs. I hope that you are all doing okay and then you're not stressing too much and you're really enjoying your years at the same time. And if you have any more questions about revision, especially for GCSEs, then you can always just comment them down below and I will try to answer them if I can. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye!